Deal, y'all? What's the deal, y'all? It's Trapper tapping in TNN Trap News Network. Back in the same. Like cracking the same, man. Here at TNN Trap News Network. Good news you can use. Good knowledge, though. You ain't finna get nobody's college, though, big dog. Hit that like, hit that comment, hit that get subscribe button for everything we got going on here at TNN Trap News Network. It's 5 in the morning, and I'm up giving bad news to you. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in LA. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in Atlanta. We up early, giving y'all that good news you can use, giving you that good knowledge that you're not finna get in nobody's college, big dog. It's the news you can use, the knowledge you ain't finna get in nobody's college. We at TNN Trap News Network. We giving y'all with John Nate early in the morning. Tap in with the tap in, man. RichTrapHouse.com. Get into that if you ain't got into that. New music, all that. Tap in, man. I ain't gonna lie, I'm tired of giving y'all the intro. It's been two years of it. It's time to switch it up. Shout out to Ceddy Nash. We finna slide over here, man. Big U, bond reconsideration is alarming. Shout out to Cedric Nashington. Big shout out to Cedric Nashington as he's sliding around giving us his news to use, his knowledge we ain't finna get in college. Let's get into this. Let's go.
And the feds basically lay out the reasons why he should not. Man, listen, I'm about to just be fair, square, obvious, and honest. Big U is not looking bad. If y'all want to jump up about 3 to 4 minutes ahead, I think that's as much as I can let y'all in on what's about to happen. Then y'all can listen to the paperwork yourself and make your own judgments. I'm not saying Big U is guilty of anything. The courts always say innocent until proven guilty. So with that being said, Big U is in a little bit of trouble. He done got on the damn phone, and I think he was being funny. Personally, I think it was just a joke. The government is basically saying, ain't no jokes here. He said that he can have Donald Trump pardon him. What? So Big U basically says, man, I can have Donald Trump pardon me. He's talking about certain things on the phone. But one of the biggest things that happened is that video that he dropped to the internet talking about Wack, Brick, 600, Loose Cannon, all of those things that he said were seen as obstruction and intimidation and all of these things. Now, there is no proof that any one of those 4 individuals are cooperating. They're co-conspirators, or what the courts called opponents, meaning his rivals, meaning ops. So the courts say that Wack and 600 are his ops. They don't say that they're cooperating with him or anything like that. So in the court paperwork you're about to see, Big U literally went to court. It's going to court tomorrow to prove his point. But his point kind of is dumb in the sense of the government saying, bro, the only reason you turned yourself in is really you had nowhere to go. And you thought by turning yourself in, you could get bond. This is supposed to be a pattern of behavior. But it turns out that he actually would have had a better chance of basically getting that bond had he never dropped that damn video on Instagram. Not only that, they're saying that
the video on Instagram of him saying that Wack and all that kind of wooty bam, yeah, that's ugly.
Big U has already intimidated witnesses. He knew the night before that the feds were coming to his door, so he was already on the run. He talked to some lawyers. Some lawyers basically gave him the advice to say, turn yourself in, because if you turn yourself in, that looks better to the courts, that you'll be able to come to court and basically your obligation.
Basically, you ain't outside running amok. We can trust you to go to court. We can trust you to be about your due diligence. We can trust you to do what you say you're gonna do and all that kind of stuff. We ain't gotta babysit you.
Now, what they're basically alleging is, of course, these main 3 things. These are the main, well, not main 3 things. These are the main things of the government. They're charging him with murder, RW. They're saying that he's an extortionist, but he's not an extortionist. They basically say he lied to these people. So all the athletes that y'all hear or anything like that, in the damn paperwork, it's basically saying he didn't extort them. It's saying he lied to them. He pulled and tugged on their heartstrings like, hey, help a brother out. You know how these cats get on that Dr. Umar shit, in my opinion. So they say, all right, Big U tugged at heartstrings and duped people into giving donations, not extortions. So everything y'all see, from the Rich Homie Quans to the Chris Browns to the Shaqs to the Draymond Greens to all of these individuals, they're not saying that they were extorted. He's saying, well, they're saying, the government is saying, Big U lied. Then to top that off, They're saying Big U already knows all of this crap. Big U already knows what he's done, who he done it to, and he's obstructed. They're saying actually too that the witnesses that they had no longer cooperated. So what they're going to try to do is pin him on the murder of RW and money crimes. Now the extortion victim, 50-50. So we'll see how that goes, but with no further ado, this is Big U's bill response from the feds. And one more thing, bruh. I'm not a professional reader, bruh. I graduated from a continuation high school, bruh.
My nigga said I'm not a professional reader. Don't worry about it, Cedric Nashington. The print be real small and the words is hard, bro. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm an all right reader, in my opinion. So if I mess up or fumble on words, I'm just not about to redo this crap. I can do it perfectly as far as read this crap, but Sadie Nash ain't doing all that, bruh. If I mess up, I mess up. I fix it. So if y'all don't like it, bruh, I don't know what to tell you. Find somebody else to do this. And one more thing. Look, I ain't got no hat on. Oh, my God. Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Big head Nash on down.
Sadie, you do got a big ass head, bro. I didn't even realize you said it. You a big headed motherfucker. I love you, bro, but you a big ass head, nigga. You and ODM Slim got some big ass heads, bro. Y'all Megaminds 1 and 2. You got Chrome Dome and Megamind.
Man, this just came out today, so if y'all look at the...
Ever hit us again with another foghorn, leghorn? Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my good time gal. Nigga, we old. If you know that, you old too.
Date it's filed. It's 4/21. That means today. I don't want to hear anybody get on here and start dissing me and all this crap. Man, listen, I'm not trying to hear nothing. So the hearing date is scheduled for tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. West Coast time. Plaintiff, United States of America, by and through its counsel of record, the United States Attorney for the Central District of California, and Assistant United States Attorneys Kevin J. Butler and Jenna Maccabee. I'm assuming that's Maccabee, but whatever, or McCabe. But we'll just say Mac. All right. Hereby files its brief in support of detention for defendant Eugene Henley Jr., also known as a.k.a. Big U, a.k.a. Unc, a.k.a. Draws, a.k.a. Hannibal Muhammad, a.k.a. Anybody Killer, a.k.a. Dave Austin. Damn, kid. All right. This brief is based upon the attachment memorandum.
Oh, right. Like, sheesh.
Appoints and authorities the files and records in this case in such further evidence and argument as the court may permit, dated April 21st, 2025. All right, so y'all got all this, right? Cool. So we're going to go through the statement of facts, and we'll just go from there. And let's scroll down. For decades, defendant Eugene Henley Jr., also known as Big U defendant, has put on a public facade, masquerading as a reformed gang member and legitimate businessman whose only ambition was to better his community. But defendant wasn't helping Crenshaw.
Now, here goes the thing. I'm not saying that Big U was right, but we can't negate the fact that them kids did get a lot out of that situation. Now, I ain't saying they got everything they should have got. I ain't saying that he didn't blah, blah, blah. I ain't saying none of that. All I am saying is the kids did get some help.
Helping himself in the shadows. Defendant was secretly operating as kingpin of a criminal enterprise that has ruled Los Angeles through violence, fear, and intimidation. Now, he seeks pretrial release under the guise of his reformed persona, even though his criminal activities have included murder, extortion, robbery, wire fraud, bank fraud, and human trafficking. The court should see through defendant's farce and keep him in custody for the safety of the community. To avoid custody, defendant will no doubt continue his double dealing as he did to celebrities and other donors that he duped into believing they were helping young, underprivileged athletes chase their dreams. So think about that part. They say he duped them. So they're not saying extortion. So when people are talking about all the athletes...
So there's no extortion. He finessed. It's a huge difference between extortion and finesse.
And all that crap and everything. Understand, they're saying that he duped them, meaning he lied to them. So all this, y'all, he extorted Draymond and all these athletes and all that crap. No, they're just saying that he lied to them. Got it? All right, cool. When in reality, they were unwittingly lining defendant's pockets as he embezzled donation after donation. Even in his short time in custody, he is up to his old tricks. Whoa. Once again, trying to use some of the same celebrities for his personal gain. He has even suggested that he can manipulate the president of the United States in intervening in his case and dropping the charges, even as he simultaneously derisively refers to the president as the Orange Man. What? Come on, what the hell? Why in custody this court?
This nigga said I can get Donald Trump to get my shit together. All right.
Should not be fooled by the good deeds defendant promises to accomplish if he could close the detention doors behind him. The truth is that he will undoubtedly cause exponential harm to the case, to the community, and to others if he were released. Defendants should remain detained for the safety of the community, the victims and witnesses. In this case, the defendant's own words, if I would have had a problem with any man, the issue would have been resolved, and he wouldn't be here, or I wouldn't be here. And for the hope of some semblance of justice for the families of his victims, indeed, with seemingly just hours of notice of his impending arrest, the defendant has already destroyed valuable evidence, attempted to paint false narrative of his criminality in the public, and publicly condemn his enemies by name. He cannot be allowed to continue on his obstructive path. Any supporters defendant may offer as sureties will not protect the community. They did not save R.W., whom defendant murdered and abandoned in the desert. They did not save defendant's countless extortion and embezzlement victims whom defendant terrorized or tricked for years. They did not stop defendant from leaving Los Angeles in the midnight hours before his arrest or hurling timing thinly.
So they saying that the people around him can't be trusted. Everybody around him a flu-flam.
Build threats in the lead up to his surrender. The court should have no trouble finding that defendant represents a danger and risk of non-appearance, non-compliance with court orders that cannot be adequately mitigated through release conditions. With the utmost respect to pretrial services, pretrial supervision is not enough. For the sake of the community, defendant should remain in custody. Defendant is a dedicated rolling 60 and leader of his own violent racketeering enterprise. Defendant is an avowed and former member of the Rolling 60 neighborhood Crip street gang as early as 1992. The Los Angeles Times described defendant as the leader of that gang, and little has changed as defendant has aged. As he states in many interviews, when asked about any gang tattoos, it ain't on you, it's in you. Indeed, defendant's gang ties run deep in his hood. Defendant has loudly recounted the terror he instilled for years. In various interviews, defendant recounts selling narcotics, taking a percentage of all illegal activity in the neighborhood, leading to the body snatchers, kidnapping crew, and eventually going to prison, where he immediately claims to have paid off the guards and taken a percentage of drug sales. Come on, y'all know that's... All right. Now, after an investigation spanner...
That's putting dubs on a Pinto. But they gonna put dubs on a Pinto. It's the feds. It's what they do.
More than 4 years, defendant was charged with running the Big U enterprise from at least 2010 until his arrest, which often used rolling 60s as muscle in his criminal activity. Specifically, defendant often assisted by rolling 60s or other members of associates of the Big U enterprise, use intimidation, fear, violence, threats of violence, assaults, extortion, and murder in the streets for power and profit. Through the media and his nonprofit development options, defendant portrayed himself as the neighborhood savior and drawing in donations and government resources intended to benefit at-risk youth, but which he oftentimes used to fund his lifestyle instead. Despite his life of crime, defendant never wanted to return to jail, so he went to great lengths to avoid law enforcement detection, tamper with witnesses, and otherwise obstruct justice. Recent examples of defendant's acts or threats of violence: murder of R.W. and I don't even know if I really want to read this, but whatever. In 2021, defendant drove to Las Vegas with another enterprise member to confront R.W., a rapper signed a defendant's record label, who was also a close friend of defendant's son and someone defendant had known for years. Apparently upset about R.W.'s lack of studio production and purported diss song. Defendant left the studio with R.W. in the middle of the night for R.W.'s Airbnb. R.W. leaving his Airbnb with his belongings was the last time he was seen alive, as he was found the next morning with gunshot wounds to the head. Defendant returned to the studio hours after he had left, claiming he had gone to the gym despite the 2 a.m. hour. Defendant's cell phone actively the obstructionist conduct of other members of the enterprise. The defendant's own words and reactions intercepted on wire prove his guilt of the heinous crime. R.W.'s murder not only demands defendant's continued detention, but cautious against what may happen to other witnesses, cooperators, and victims were defended to be released on bond, robbery, and extortion. Throughout the period of interception and before, defendant was captured on audio and video recordings extorting victim one, both through a co-defendant.
Now, the paperwork sounds bad. They still have to prove all these things, but God damn, this paperwork sound bad. They still got to prove all this stuff, yeah, but God damn, this paperwork sound bizarre.
Mr. Robinson, and personally, in doing so, defendant and Robinson frequently threatened violence against victim one if he failed to pay their fees. Those threats were not empty. When Victim 1 started to ignore defendants' calls demanding extortion payments, defendants sent multiple armed robbers to Victim 1's dispensary to rob him and then demanded $10,000 from Victim 1.
Story loose cannon, simple, slow ass told.
To prevent future robberies. And multiple intercepted calls, defendant and his co-conspirators discussed even more robberies they were committing. Robinson also frequently told Victim 1 about defendant's violence, including that defendant was the only OG still actively committing murders. In addition to the constant extortion of Victim 1, defendant extorted Victim 2 for $30,000 for a party thrown in defendant's honor in December 2021. When the victims requested to pay only $20,000, defendant responded with force, threatening, "I'll tear that bitch up. It won't be a club there no more." And then sending Robinson, another co-defendant, Mark Martin, and members of the Rolling 60s to confront Victim 2 at his business and extort $30,000 from him. While the substantive extortion counts are currently limited to just some of those extortions of Victim 1 and Victim 2, they are not defendants' only extortions. For example, on October 19, 2021, defendant told Victim 1 and defendant was taking over the extortion of another business owner. Then, on November 7, 2022, on an intercepted call, after yet another extortion victim stated that defendant had not fully paid the extortion victim for work on defendant's vehicle, defendant directed Martin to call the extortion victim right now and stated that he would go out there and kill that nigga. On February 14, 2023, damn, on Valentine's Day?
On Valentine's Day? God damn, he's got no boundaries. Sheesh.
On another intercepted call, Robinson told defendant that Robinson told Jew Boy that he owed the Big U Enterprise money, that they would allow a payment plan, but if he did not pay, they were going to shut this motherfucker down. Power to direct violence. Making him that much more dangerous, defendant holds power over others threatening and committing violence. For example, on November 23, 2022, on an intercepted call, defendant said that he could pay 3 people $50 each to beat up someone and described paying people to mess up a store that was refusing
$50 is a really low number. Really low number.
To provide defendant a discount. On April 17, 2023, on another intercepted call, defendant directed an individual to deliver a message to another marijuana dispensary owner. That defendant said, "Fuck him," and that he fucked with the wrong guy. Despite a prior 23-year sentence for armed robbery, defendant stayed armed. Since at least July 20th, 1992, defendant has been prohibited from even possessing firearms based on his felony convictions for armed robbery. Defendant stayed armed. Since at least July 20th, 1992, defendant has been prohibited from even possessing firearms based on his felony convictions for second-degree robbery with a firearm, conspiracy, and drug trafficking, for which he...
So, 92, 2002, 12. So for the last 30 years, nigga, you ain't supposed to have no Blake on you. And you got caught with, they said that you got caught with Blake on you, all on the wiretap. Damn.
You see the 23-year prison sentence. Upon his release from prison, he nevertheless continued to use firearms himself, like he murdered RW and directed others to use firearms, like when they robbed Victim 1's dispensary. Throughout his investigation, recordings corroborated that defendant constantly was armed. On October 22nd, 2022, Robinson told Victim 1 that defendant and Robinson would be attending an after party at a club that Victim 1 was promoting and that a pat down is out because defendant would be in attendance, implying that defendant was armed. On an intercepted call a month later, defendant told an incarcerated individual that anyone coming at him better come correct because defendant always has 2 blowers, i.e., firearms on him. On January 3rd, 2023, on an intercepted call, defendant described to an incarcerated individual tooling up with firearms to travel to Crips neighborhood because we were the most arrogant, bougie, self-righteous motherfuckers on the planet. On April 1st, 2023, on another intercepted call, defendant asked someone to grab defendant's blower, which he left on the ground, and a blue sweatshirt in front of a tire. Defendant is not only a physical danger, but a financial danger too. Defendant's crimes against victims are not confined only to violence. He spent decades creating a facade of a reformed gang member who seeks to build rather than destroy his community. So, disguised defendant used that persona primarily
Calling this nigga financial danger is a new level of diabolical.
To take from the very community he claims to help. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowed from charitable donors and government programs to defendants' developing options bank account. Almost immediately, he siphoned off much money into his personal bank account. Defendant got richer and richer off his fraud, like the extortions and robberies, owning multiple homes, driving a Mercedes, taking lavish trips, and shopping for luxuries like a $30,000 necklace. The money taken from donors and taxpayers' pockets victims will never find their intended benefactors, the at-risk youth and children of Crenshaw. That damage could not be undone, but defendant's success in deceiving politicians, celebrities, and community activists, as well as the public at large, further militates against his release back into the community as he attempts to fund an expensive defense. Defendant is fluent in obstruction. Oh, this ought to be crazy. All of it may be founded on crimes, but defendant built a charmed life following his 23-year sentence for armed robbery. He does not want to give it up and uses obstruction frequently to avoid that. The destruction of surveillance footage, use of intercepted applications like FaceTime, demands to meet in person to avoid law enforcement, intercepted communications, use of multiple phones and cars, orders not to speak.
So it sounds like FaceTime is getting you niggas off with these crimes. It sounds like FaceTime is not being able to be transcribed.
On crimes, the defendant built a charmed life following his 23-year sentence for armed robbery. He does not want to give it up and uses obstruction frequently to avoid that. The destruction of surveillance footage, use of intercepted applications like FaceTime, demands to meet in person to avoid law enforcement, intercepted communications, use of multiple phones and cars, orders not to speak to law enforcement, and chastising any perceived or suspected cooperators are detailed in the charging instruments. A few are also highlighted here. Even when the criminal charges were not against defendant personally, defendant instructed a victim relative that the victim was to go to the lineup, tell him to pick the wrong person to insinuate defendant's associate from the charges, a master manipulator. Defendant told another associate that to influence the media for his lawsuit against law enforcement, he should show both positive and negative parts of his life, wear glasses, and say that he was working with developing options, even though he was not. On multiple intercepted calls, defendant talked about beating up or at least breaking a witness's jaw. And while defendant may claim other reasons for feuding with that witness, this court should protect him
Wait, so the court is protecting Wack 100 from Big U? Wait. Hold on. So the courts are protecting Wack 100 from Big U.
About beating up or at least breaking a witness's jaw. And while defendant may claim other reasons for feuding with that witness, this court should protect him after fleeing with his phones in the hours before his scheduled arrest, in this case, in an attempt to intimidate and dissuade anyone from cooperating with law enforcement or otherwise reporting information about defendant. Defendant posted publicly on Instagram naming his co-defendants and known opponents, instructing the public not to associate with them and claiming that if they did, they were not black. And I told y'all, bro, I said that post he put on Instagram,
that's gonna be taken as a threat,
was insane. I did not understand that. Like, bro, I damn near went off. But, it is what it is. In an attempt to poison the jury pool, defendant posted on Instagram claiming racial profiling, ignoring that almost every single one of the defendant's victims, from RW to many of his extortion, robbery, fraud victims, and the at-risk youth he's supposed to help are black, and blaming his co-defendants and opponents for the charges filed against him in a federal criminal complaint. Well, the news, y'all did the same exact stuff holding that damn press conference. What are you talking about? So if y'all gonna claim that shit, then y'all gotta claim y'all did the same exact thing. That like stuff like that. And I don't know if Big U's guilty or innocent. It's always innocent till proven guilty. But they just did the same thing. You don't think that whole entire press release wasn't to poison the jury pool at all either?
Oh, for sure. You gonna make sure that the public opinion looks crazy.
Come on now. Y'all playing a hell of a game right there. Legal standard. A defendant must be detained pending trial where no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of any other person and the community. 18 U.S.C. 3142E1. Detention is thus appropriate for a defendant who is either a danger to the community or at risk of non-appearance. And in the Bail Reform Act, we're not going to read all that. We're just going to go all the way to the bottom. He should remain detained because he is a risk of non-appearance and a danger to the community. The 43 federal charges against defendant and the damning evidence against him, his dangerous history.
43 charges.
History and characteristics, and the risks of numerous specific individuals and the community at large, if he were to be released, all support his detention pending trial. Nature and circumstances of the offenses. The nature and circumstances of defendant's offenses unequivocally weigh in favor of detention. There is no crime more serious or permanent than the murder that defendant committed, and still, defendant did not stop there. Courts considering cases like defendants have unanimously ruled in favor of detention. See United States versus Tortorta, I'm gonna say Tortorta. That's how I'm gonna say that right there. Detailing on murder, reversing district court's release order, noting defendant's total commitment to a life of crime, quoting defendant's threats to kill, and defining his association with organized crime and a devotion to the mafia, a highly relevant consideration to detention. The Torta court detained the defendant, who made the mafia his highest priority in life and pledge fealty to its needs. Whatever the circumstances, defendant here, like in Torta, is virtually a paradigm of the criminal who, within the complaint of the Bail Reform Act, might plausibly be subjected to pretrial detention on grounds of dangerousness. Similarly, where a magistrate judge released a defendant charged with RICO crimes, including conspiracy to commit attempted murder and conspiracy to commit assault, with the background of an enterprise engaged in other acts of violence, the district court reversed, noting that the defendant is charged with violent and serious crimes and allegedly has been a member of his street gang since May 2012, and that the seriousness and violent nature of the crimes the defendant is charged with weighs against his release. United States versus Cazares, where a defendant was charged in a RICO indictment based on extortion, wire fraud, witness tampering, and other crimes, and he directed the activities of his co-defendants as defendant did here. Detention was warranted based on his activities as well as the activities of those he supervised and controlled. United States versus Sassoon, and cite multiple second court cases that have rejected as insufficient various conditions of release proposed in cases involving a pretrial detention of purported leaders of organized crime families shown to be involved in violent criminal activities. Also see United States versus Colombo, reverse a release order, even where defendant did not directly participate in any crime alleged, but led the criminal enterprise that carried out criminal activities at his direction. Defendants facing RICO charges based on predicate acts of murder, conspiracy to murder, and other crimes were also detained on larger for readily furthering organized crime criminal objectives through violence, which appropriately describes defendant here. United States versus Arena. Moreover, as currently charged, defendant faces a statutory maximum of well over 600 years, even discounting defendant's
600 years. Goddamn.
Defendant's criminal history due to his age is currently charged. Defendant faces a likely guidelines range of life in prison based on a total offense level of 43 for count one alone. God damn. The severity of the pretrial penalties involved arguments, defendant's risks of non-appearance. See United States versus Brenneman. Affirming denial of bail based on risk of non-appearance, where defendant facing fraud charges that exposed him to a range of just 57 to 71 months imprisonment. United States versus Townsend, explaining that facing the much graver penalties possible under the present indictment, the defendants have an even greater incentive to consider flight, and noting that electronic monitoring cannot assure prevention of non-appearance. See,
he's saying that this nigga can't even be like, house arrest ain't enough. This nigga cut that ish off and go on the dash.
Also, United States versus Gonzalez Claudio, it is entirely reasonable to conclude that a risk of flight is more likely in circumstances where evidence indicates that a defendant has engaged in terrorist activities and faces a substantial risk of being convicted of serious pending charges and receiving significant punishment. While defendant turned himself in after a period of flight and removal of evidence, he did not, at that time, know the weight of the charges, the substantial sentence he faces, or the insurmountable weight of the evidence proving his crimes. See United States versus Moscar Scarretono? I don't know. I ain't even finna butcher that one. The steeper of the potential sentence, the more probable the flight of risk is, especially considering the strong case of government quotation omitted. In sum, the nature and circumstances of defendant's offenses demonstrate that he is a risk of both danger and non-appearance. Weight of the evidence. The evidence that defendant committed the charged offenses is overwhelming and cannot be ignored. In assessing defendant's risk of danger and non-appearance in this case, see United States versus Aslian. I don't know. I'm finna stop doing that shit. We just finna keep on reading, man. Given the nature of the crime and the strength of the government's case, we find that the government has met its burden of showing by clear and convincing evidence that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the safety of the community. Emphasis added. Defendant was captured of audio recorders and intercepted wire calls discussing various violent and other crimes for months and even years. Many of his extortions were themselves captured in recordings. The financial records and tax documents.
He told on himself, man. Told on himself, talking on that phone.
Do not lie either. They show exactly how defendant committed all his fraud and The recordings show why. All of the evidence in this case conclusively shows defendant's personal involvement in murder, extortion, robbery, fraud, human trafficking, and tax crimes. Defendant's entire purpose was based on financial gain, respect, fear, and intimidation. Accordingly, the weight of the evidence favors defendant's continued detention. History and characteristics of defendant. This court should not fall victim to any argument about defendant's lack of convictions since his release from state custody in early 2000s. Absence of convictions is not the same as absence of crimes. Defendant's history and characteristics.
They saying that he committed crimes, he just didn't get caught. They want him bad. They want him bad.
Plainly favor detention. Defendant's involvement in multiple violent offenses while holding himself out to be a gang interventionist working with law enforcement renders him particularly dangerous to the community. The fact that Barone committed and planned violent crimes even more when purportedly cooperating with authorities signals a degree of dangerousness unlikely to be deterred by bail release conditions. I know they finna have fun with that one. They about to call Big U a or whatever because they was working with police. I know exactly what's about to happen. I'm not saying he snitched based on that, but I know the fact that Barone committed and planned violent crimes even more when purportedly cooperating with authorities signals a degree of dangerousness unlikely to be.
So they saying that he committed violent crimes and he cooperated with authorities. Damn. It's gonna be ugly.
Deterred by bail release conditions. I know they finna have fun with that one. They about to call Big U a snitch or whatever because they just said he was working with police. I know exactly what's about to happen. I'm not saying he is snitch based on that, but I know it is coming. Y'all can clock it like a damn highway patrol officer sitting with a speed gun. Dangerousness unlikely to be deterred by bail release conditions. Affirming district court's explanation that defendant's Hobbs Act robbery crimes were a danger to the community and affirming sentence. His violent grip over Los Angeles is exacerbated by his apparent continued access to firearms despite being a felon repeatedly discussed on intercepted calls. Order and detention because other reasons, evidence of substance abuse and firearms registration in defendant's names also show defendant poses a danger to the community. United States versus Hernandez. Let's keep on going down. Defendant's depraved and duplicitous scheme to intimidate and defraud the very community that he benefited from claiming to help cast his criminal history in an even more troubling light. Indeed, defendant's history of charges for murder and other gang-related activities compared with the murder and other violent crimes he is now charged with committing alongside gang members suggests that defendant did not change his criminal behavior in any way. He just got better at hiding it. More recent arrests for child abuse and being a felon in possession of a firearm also became more ominous in light of the evidence in this case. What? The question.
Child abuse? Where the hell did child abuse come from? This is getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Goodness gracious, this rabbit hole is getting deep.
Pause and considering whether the defendant is able or willing to conduct himself without putting others in danger. The defendant so clearly fled from law enforcement the night before his arrest, only to publicly blame others for his crimes and charges, reinforces his guilt and his incompatibility with pretrial release. Damn, okay. Defendant surrender to law enforcement was likewise not to fight the charges and to show he has nothing to hide, but was taken with the precise goal of crafting an argument for bail before the court. However, while defendant may have made the calculated decision in consultation with his attorneys to return to Los Angeles after his relatively brief flight from his arrest on the complaint, that callous inevitability changes today. After the 43-count indictment was returned with extremely serious offenses carrying enormous potential penalties, he is now, for the first time in decades, facing the very likely prospect of never leaving prison alive. Indeed, that would be a guideline sentence on the charges the government is prepared to prove by, among other things, the testimony of witnesses and victims and electronic evidence, including intercepted phone calls and surreptitious recordings, giving the serious nature of the charges, the strength of the evidence, and the defendant's access to vast amounts of resources and criminal support. His risk of non-appearance is more pronounced today than it has ever been. Nature and seriousness of the danger posed by defendant's release. Defendant is not only a risk of danger to the community, but has acted on his dangerousness time and again. While this brief summarizes many of the defendant's violent acts, it may be missing others, given defendant's use of others to commit crimes for him and his proclivity for talking in person or on an intercepted application to avoid detention. And still, defendant's varied crimes are still omnipresent in his recorded communications. Further, defendant's release will pose a serious risk to individuals who have assisted the government in this case, as well as witnesses and victims who have so far refused to cooperate or provide statements because of what they know. Whoa. As defendant made clear in an intercepted call on January 5, 2023, being a rat means you are done, indeed. Trying to intimidate and dissuade anyone from cooperating with law enforcement or otherwise reporting information about defendant before turning himself in. Defendant posed an Instagram video naming his co-defendants and known opponents, instructing the public not to associate with them and claiming that if they did, they were not black. This tracks with the means and methods.
They're not black. It's crazy.
Methods of the enterprise described and the indictment threatening or pressuring victims or witnesses of crimes committed by members or associates of the Big U enterprise to avoid interaction with or to provide untruthful statements or testimony to law enforcement officers. Defendants' release would pose a serious risk to the safety of those specific individuals. They're basically saying, hey, if we let him out, he's going to basically get on the internet and tell about all the people that right now are protected that's about to come out and tell. Threats of physical harm to cooperating witnesses risk serious danger to the witnesses themselves as well as to the community more broadly. To be plain, such conduct fundamentally endangers the integrity of the judicial process. United States versus, I'm just going to stop reading that. Let's go to, you're talking about LaFontaine explaining detention may be even more justified in violations. We're not doing that. Then in cases where defendants' past criminality was said to support a finding of general dangerousness and rejected contention that her attempts to influence the testimony of witnesses did not constitute the type of danger to the community that would support detention. They must be talking about something else. Because there's no way. Even the nonviolent forms of obstruction of peace pose a sufficiently serious danger to the community such that pretrial detention is warranted. That's all in quotes. So no bail resources can mitigate defendant's danger to the community is light of the severity of his charged offenses and his obstruction during the investigation and following the announcement of charges. And then we're going to go down. Likewise, any proposed release conditions, including electronic monitoring, would all suffer from the critical flaw and that they depend on defendant's good faith compliance in order to be effective. In particular, electronic monitoring does not prevent a defendant from committing crimes within the monitoring radius, and there is no reasonable way to assure that a defendant would not make impermissible stops or detours on his way to places permitted under the restrictions. Let's keep on going. Because defendant's personal commitment to abide by release conditions is the key factor for determining his fitness for bail. In particular, given defendant's history of engaging in obstructive conduct, no condition on the bond form could prevent and detect such conduct. And then let's just go down. For example, United States, a case where defendant was charged with witness tampering among other crimes and where obstruction remained an ongoing concern. The circuit court reversed the district court's release of defendant on bail conditions because the $1 million bond, which was to be secured. So we ain't really doing all that. More specifically, the appellate court found out we ain't doing that either. Even participation in pretrial services, computer monitoring program would be insufficient to ensure that the defendant will cease engaging in unauthorized or inappropriate communications in person on undisclosed devices or through third parties. Indeed, defendant flouted BOP rules for years or BOP rules for years. Defendant previously bragged about paying guards and overseeing the entire drug trade on the yard when previously serving time. More recently, as overheard on an intercepted call on November 22nd, 2022, when defendant told an incarcerated individual that defendant was going to charge someone in federal prison $6,000 to have a phone smuggled to him. Then on January 3rd, 2023, on an intercepted call, defendant told an incarcerated individual that defendant was going to purchase 6 miniature phones to send to the incarcerated individual so that he could sell them in prison for $1,000 each. Now in custody himself, defendant has asked his family to contact known victims in the case. If defendant cannot abide by rules in the highly restrictive setting of detention, there is no reason he should be trusted to abide by the court's conditions in less restrictive setting. The risk to numerous victims and witnesses in this case, as well as the rest of the public, is too great to give defendant that chance conclusion. If the court wants to know how defendant will conduct himself on pretrial release, it need look no further than the recordings documenting defendant's conduct and threats through his investigation. With everything to lose, including the immense goodwill he fraudulently procured from the community in his city, the defendant still told anyone who dared to ask he was a killer. And he proved that he was because defendant is both a danger to the community and risk of non-appearance should the case not go his way. The court should permanently detain defendant pending trial.
They want that man to expire. They want that man to expire in the federal penitentiary. Red dots to the left, you know the rest, man. Be better today than what you were yesterday. Be even better tomorrow, but today be at your best. Free Avenue Angel is free. Keep y'all updated as this story more continue to develop. We gone.